How much do lawyers cost in employment law legal issues? That's what this video is all about, so stick around. We're first going to take a look at basic employment law issues like the consultation, legal advice. We'll then take a look at what companies have to spend on employment lawyers. And then we're going to get to what most people want to know, is how much is a contingency fee for an employment lawyer if you're an employee. So let's first take a look at the basics. If you call a lawyer, you're going to be wondering, how much does it cost for me just to call this lawyer and tell them the basics of my story? Well, most plaintiff employment lawyers, that's lawyers who represent employees, don't charge anything for the consultation. It's a free consultation. Some employment lawyers do charge a relatively nominal fee, a couple $100 for the consultation. That shouldn't be a reason for you to be scared off. It's generally well worth it. When we're talking about legal advice, so if you're an employee and you work at a company and you've got this legal issue and it's an employment issue and you want to hire a lawyer to review the facts and then give his opinion, his or her opinion, that's just a legal advice. The lawyer's not getting involved in doing things on behalf of the employee. Generally, plaintiff employment lawyers and even companies, they charge an hourly rate for something like that. Now, you might find it difficult if you're an employee to find a lawyer to do something like this. And the reason is it's very difficult to get employees to spend several $100s an hour on an issue, because generally employees don't have as much money as companies. So don't be surprised if you have to contact several lawyers before you get one before you find one that is willing to be hired on an hourly rate. Severance negotiations. A lot of people contact employment lawyers because they got a severance package that they're not happy with and they want more. Well, regardless of the merits of a severance package, severance negotiations are difficult to price because some of them can be really quick and some of them can take a long time. So most lawyers, if they're really interested in doing a severance negotiation for you, they'll do it by the hour. They very rarely will do it on a percentage basis because generally money has already been offered. But that severance negotiation, some lawyers do a flat rate. But again, you should be worried about hiring a lawyer on a flat rate for a severance negotiation, because if that lawyer has to expend several hours working on it, the $750 or the $1,200 to do that negotiation is not going to be enough. If you just want to hire a lawyer to review your severance agreement, then they'll be more apt to charge a flat rate or a nominal hourly rate. Moving beyond the basics that we just discussed, let's talk about what companies have to spend on employment lawyers. Well, there's two scenarios. One is just advice and then lawsuits. Let's talk about advice first. Generally, companies have employment lawyers on retainer, or they actually hire in-house employment lawyers. Let's talk about the retainer scenario. If you want an employment lawyer you pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, this is my legal issue. This employee just threatened us with a lawsuit. How should we respond? Well, there's no lawsuit yet, and you just want advice on how to deal with it, or you want the lawyer to handle it. Generally, what you're going to do is that you're going to hire that lawyer with a retainer. You're going to give him several $1,000s, up to $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 up front, and that lawyer over time is going to work on an hourly basis and withdraw money from that retainer. Where does that retainer go? Well, lawyers have what we call trust accounts. So when you give a lawyer a retainer, it goes into their attorney-client trust account where it's held in trust for your company or for you as an individual. And that money is protected. There's all sorts of rules that govern attorney-client trust accounting. So that money typically is extremely safe. And the lawyer, as they work, they charge by the hour and they get reimbursed out of that retainer. And each month, as the funds get depleted from that retainer, they ask the company to replenish that retainer. Well, how much per hour do lawyers charge? Well, it depends on the lawyer, and it depends on the jurisdiction. Some lawyers will charge $150 an hour. The vast majority charge much more than that, but sometimes up to $1,000 an hour to handle typical employment advice. But when we get to lawsuits, it gets far more expensive. And when I say expensive, not necessarily by the hour, but the amount of hours that are needed to expend on the matter. So typically, when a company gets sued and they don't have insurance, they go hire an employment lawyer, they give a retainer just like before, and then the lawyer charges per hour. Now, most defense lawyers will give you an estimate as to how much they think that lawsuit is going to cost in defense fees, let alone what they're going to settle, what they think they can negotiate and settle the case for. It's not uncommon for defense costs, especially on higher value cases, to get into the $500,000 range. It can be extremely expensive to hire an employment lawyer to defend a harassment or discrimination or wrongful termination case. So it's important that you get a really good lawyer that you trust, who's not going to overbill the case, is not going to lie on their billing, they're going to be honest with how many hours they and their staff are actually spending on that lawsuit. But moving beyond that, a lot of companies have insurance. Employment Practices Liability Insurance, or EPLI for short, is the go-to insurance for employment law issues. There's also general practice insurance or general liability insurance that does cover some types of employment disputes. But EPLI insurance is really, really valuable, especially if you have a workforce over 25 people or you have litigious employees. How much does an EPLI insurance cost? Well, that depends. The monthly premium generally isn't that crazy. If you get sued, then you have to pay a deductible, and I've seen deductibles between $5,000 to $30,000. It depends on your policy and how much your premium is. But in Employment Practices Liability Insurance also provides you an incredible thing. It's that it separates the financial aspect of paying for the lawyer out of your daily life. Whereas if you don't have EPLI insurance, you're paying a lawyer a lot of money each month, and it's very stressful because at the end of the case, you know you're either going to pay a settlement or you're going to win, but then you're still stuck with all those defense costs because you don't really ever get to recoup that from the plaintiff employee who sued your company. Let's get to what most people want to know about, which is contingency fees for employees. If you're an employee and you were just fired and you want to hire an employment lawyer, it's very rare that you're going to have to pay a lawyer by the hour, with one caveat. If you can't find a lawyer to work on your case on a contingency fee, first of all, a red flag should go up. If no lawyer is willing to take your case, it might not be a very good case and you might not want to pursue it. But you can hire a lawyer even if you don't have a great contingency fee case if you're willing to pay them by the hour. Again, how much per hour is going to depend on the lawyer. Anywhere between $200 an hour to $600-700 an hour is typical in California. But contingency fees are where the vast majority of employment lawsuits are at. Meaning you're an employee and you just got fired, you contact an employment lawyer, they're eager to take your case, they charge a percentage of the total recovery of the case. And they actually expend their own law firm money in pursuing the case because it costs a lot of money to pursue a lawsuit. So they spend money on your case. They're motivated to maximize the value of the case because they get paid more the higher the value of the case. And you don't have to pay that money up front to a lawyer. They charge it at the end of the case. When the case settles, the money goes from the insurance company or the defendant, the employer, to the lawyer. They put that money in their trust account. Then they take their fee and they take the amount that goes to the client and give the client a check. It's a beautiful thing. Well, how much? How much is a typical contingency fee in employment law? Well, typically the range is between 33% up to 45%, sometimes 50% when cases are in trial or on appeal. You go, whoa, that's a big variety of fees. Well, it's a negotiable. And a lawyer can't charge an unconscionable fee, the rules against it, but they have negotiations with their clients up front on what the fee is going to be. Some lawyers say, this is my fee, take it or leave it. And when it's really alarming from an employment lawyer's perspective when an employee wants to negotiate that fee and negotiate that fee hard, because it's a red flag. Typically, you want your lawyer to be motivated to maximize the value of your case. You don't want to nickel and dime your lawyer and try to get that percentage as low as possible. It's much better to let that lawyer pursue the case and spend their own time and money on that case to maximize the value. So I wouldn't worry too much about the percentage that the lawyer is going to take at the end of the day, because you might not get anything. And so don't worry so much about how much the lawyer is going to get paid at the end. Also, a lot of employment lawyers charge a tiered rate, a tiered contingency fee. So if you file a lawsuit and the lawsuit settles the next day, which very rarely happens, they're going to charge less than if they have to take that case all the way to trial and spend 2 years in law in motion and all this discovery and then try the case, or maybe even appeal the case. They're going to charge a higher contingency fee. So it goes up according to the amount of work the lawyers had to spend on the case. Also, in employment law, in certain types of cases, you can get attorney fees back, meaning the employment lawyer, there's a statute at play that if they win your case at trial, not only do they get the total value of the case, meaning your settlement, but then they also get to recoup the attorney fees, or what their lodestar is. So make sure you ask your lawyer about that, because it's a wonderful and powerful liability incentive to push defendants into early settlement negotiations. I hope you found this video helpful. Take care.